Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Go Beyond. My name is Alyssa Robinson. I am the digital strategist here at Treach, and I am here with our senior pastor, Reverend Daniel Humbert. And Go Beyond is a time that we dig deeper into the message from Sundays. And on Mondays, we've started adopting the Huddle discussion. So every Sunday, we provide a Huddle guide that has key takeaways, next steps, scripture, some intriguing questions to ask around the dinner table. And so we're taking a little piece of that called the Huddle discussion and answering those questions together. So you should see in the link above this video, a link to the Huddle guide, the full Huddle guide, so that you can take that and ask questions within your family. But I'll go ahead and get started with our first question today. Because yesterday we were taught, it was All Saints Day, and Pastor Nick was telling us about the cloud of witnesses. And so we're kind of reflecting on who has influenced our faith. And so our first question today is, who first taught you about Jesus and what it means to follow him?
Yeah, isn't that a great question? So I kind of have two answers. One goes way back, and then one is, well, they both go way back because I'm old. The first one goes back to when I was in third grade. I had a third grade Sunday school teacher named Monty Doty. She was an elementary school teacher for a profession, and she happened to teach Sunday school. And she's the first one that kind of helped me sort of understand that there was anything real about this guy named Jesus, and that he actually loved me and wanted something to do with me. And so that was a pretty profound lesson for a third grader. And then sort of move forward into youth group and actually just slightly beyond that. We got a new youth pastor every year at our church. And so we got lots of folks who were in training at the seminary. But after undergrad, well, I guess actually when I moved into college, I was still helping as a volunteer with the youth ministry at my home church. And one of the associate pastors, Joanne Holy, was, she taught me a lot about Jesus and helped me to better understand what I just call the real guy. And it was profound for me and helped me in terms of better understanding what I was going to do eventually through seminary and become a pastor and all that. And so she was very instrumental in my understanding of Jesus. Really cool.
Well, and this question was really difficult for me as I was thinking through it, because I know that in some Go Beyond episodes and some of your messages that you've shared on Sunday, you've talked a little bit about how you weren't necessarily raised as a church kid. You were kind of going on your own, and sometimes your family would go and sometimes they wouldn't. For me, I was a church kid, like through and through. I was in church 7 days a week, still am. And so it's really hard for me to identify individuals. I can't think of a single person who I'm like, yeah, they are responsible for teaching me about who Jesus is, because it is just so ingrained as a part of my upbringing. I know my parents talked about it. I know my grandparents talked about it. I know every Sunday school teacher I ever had talked about it, but I can't think of a specific person of like, okay, they really showed me who Jesus is. And part of me wishes that I had one person to focus on, but another part of me is like, man, like I have just been fortunate enough I can't remember specifically being taught who Jesus is, but I know who Jesus is because it has been shown to me through actions my entire life.
Yeah. And so you've got quite literally a great cloud of witnesses, right? And so I do think it's important that we own that there may not be a single individual, but a collection of folks. And that's the great cloud of witnesses that just kind of help us out, right? Some of whom are family, some of whom are church members, some of whom are neighbors, there's just all kinds.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if this is included in the cloud of witnesses, but I also have a few witnesses who have taught me who Jesus is not.
Yeah.
I don't know if that counts as a part of it.
I think it does, actually. Yeah.
So our second question for today, who in your life might need to hear the good news about Jesus? I feel like the church answer is everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that is the church answer, but and it's also a bit of a challenge to sort of identify, golly, is there somebody that I know or somebody that I'm in relationship with that I'd like to share this good news with? And the reality is, yeah, I mean, on several different levels, there are a few family members who I know could benefit from this peace of God that Jesus offers, this sort of internal assurance that, golly, life really can be good and God really does love us. And so there are a couple of family members. And then I would bet, though I don't have any real confirmation of this, is that there are a few of my neighbors who probably could benefit from what it is Christ has to offer. And, every once in a while we'll have a brief conversation either about faith or about, what I call greater matters. And it's just interesting to find where people are and where they are or are not with regard to faith of any kind. And so I try to do what I just call sort of the backdoor stuff of just every once in a while bring it up or talk about it or what's meaningful to me. And hopefully it's not overbearing or, intrusive, because I think that's one of the worst things we can do is be either one of those things, overbearing or intrusive. But I think when there's genuine dialogue, there's a back and forth and a talking out of, golly, what does this mean to you? Or how has this had impact in your life? I think that's always helpful.
Yeah. Well, and so when I think of the people who most need to hear, I focused on the words, the good news,
Mm.
who need to hear the good news of Jesus, because I think that so many people have been hurt by the church and they've kind of experienced the bad news,
Yeah.
which the bad news is that we're humans and we get it wrong. And I think that the people who most need to hear the good news are the people who have been hurt and ostracized by the church and made to feel like they don't belong, or they're not living up to expectations, or they're not following the rules the way that we put them out in our human ways. But I also know that, saying, hey, can I tell you about the gospel is not the way to do it. It's kind of more of the come and see mentality, and showing people, letting them see who Jesus is rather than letting them hear about who Jesus is. And that's something that's really difficult to do, but it kind of makes me think back to my childhood of, I can't remember people sitting me down and telling me who Jesus is, and yet I know who this is. And I just hope that I can be that example for other people of, like, you know what, nobody's really told me who Jesus is, but I know that Alyssa identifies as a Christian, and I can get on board with, the what she's doing and seeing and believing and all of that. But yeah, I know a lot of people who have been deeply, deeply hurt by the church. And I think that they most need the good news.
Yeah. And I think that's where you and I have the opportunity to help distinguish the difference between who is Jesus, this guy who can offer something, and what is the church. Clearly, there's a correlation, but they're not the same thing. And we always, I don't know if always is the right word, but we often need to help people see that distinction. The church is an avenue for helping connect people with Jesus, but the church isn't Jesus. The church is a bunch of people who are sinful and error-ridden and fault-filled and all that kind of stuff, and yet they are kind of the representation of Jesus. And so we've got to just kind of, I think it's important to help people see that, particularly folks who've been hurt by the church, to help them to see that that hurt, while real and painful, wasn't Jesus. It was some people who messed up and who clearly didn't represent Jesus well.
Mm-hmm. And this next question wasn't included in the Huddle guide. We only had 2 questions in the Huddle guide, and I can't stop at 2. So I added a bonus question.
Way to go.
And my bonus question today is, who makes up your cloud of witnesses? And what does that phrase, cloud of witnesses, mean to you?
Yeah. Well, I believe I'm very fortunate. My cloud of witnesses has involved many churches and certainly many pastors and many colleagues in ministry. And so it goes to, for me, the cloud of witnesses is anybody I've encountered in my lifetime, whether dead or alive currently, who've helped me understand the faith and who've helped connect me with Jesus. And so some of those folks obviously are still living, and I relate to them on a regular and ongoing basis. And some of them have been gone for years, decades even, and yet they still have had profound impact on who I am. And obviously, the older I get, the longer those decades go. But it's strange sometimes to reflect back and think that in my particular case, for instance, golly, it's been I'm pushing 40 years outside of high school and 35 years outside of college, and that those decades, man, they just passed by so quickly. And I reflect back on somebody who's been dead, golly, 30 years, and I think, how could that possibly be? How could it possibly have passed so quickly? And because it still feels like I remember just yesterday being with them, or and so those clouds of witnesses are highly impactful. And sometimes I have, sort of intense thoughts and feelings about some of those relationships, and other times it's just in passing, and I don't give any real um, attention to it, and yet I know that it's there, and I know they've been there for me, and it's very uplifting and very powerful. I think that's why both Nick's message Sunday and the experience of the service, to be able to name people, whether online or in the room, was really quite powerful. When we were in the room, people verbalized it, and while we were online, people typed, and there's something very connective about that, right? Of typing those names and having that remembrance is really pretty cool.
Mm. Yeah. And when I think of, my personal cloud of witnesses, I've been very fortunate that I have not experienced a lot of death in my immediate realm. So, I have one grandparent who passed before I was born. The rest of my grandparents are still alive.
Wow.
And so I haven't really had people who I felt so ingrained in part of my life who have passed on. And so that's not something that I have experienced personally, to feel that deep connection with somebody who has passed. And I don't know what that'll feel like when I get to that point. So when I think about, defining the cloud of witnesses, to me, it feels like some far off, I don't know, idea of, okay, there's this cloud of witnesses. I don't necessarily know who they are. And I know that there are people who have come before me who are connected to me, whether it be genealogically or in some other way. But it doesn't feel personal to me at this point in my life. So I know that someday it will. And we'll see what that feels like to me when it happens.
Well, but my challenge to you is to recognize that you've got a cloud of witnesses who are alive and in your life
Mm.
now as well. The cloud of witnesses does not just have to be those who passed on.
Right.
I believe it's also those in our lives now, and to me, that makes it more personal.
All right. Well, that is about all the time that we have today. So just as a reminder, we will be live again at 12:30 on Wednesday for another episode of Go Beyond. And you can catch all previous episodes at tmumc.org/go beyond. So